Hi, my name's Billy Cancel. I'm a Brooklyn-based poet and performer, and today I'm speaking from Kingston, Jamaica, where I'm going to be giving a short presentation on my paper Didcot A that was part of the most recent Industrial Archeology journal edition. We're essentially going to be looking at some of the nuts and bolts behind the paper. So if I can just bring you all onto the shared screen. And we're off. So I originally chose to do my paper on Didcot A, which was one of the sites of Didcot Power Station, for a number of reasons. Firstly, because the silhouette of the fully intact original power station was a mainstay of my childhood while growing up in the nearby market town of Wantage, Oxfordshire. At that point in the 80s, the area was in a point of transition whereby the rural Oxfordshire countryside was moving into a period of phased commuter belt development. For that area, a Didcot power station was and always was ever really the only single prominent example of heavy industry on the landscape, with its enormous scale making it ever present and visible for miles around. Additionally, I was interested in the forces at work actually at the site of Didcot A, how it witnessed the rise and fall of fossil fuels, political and environmental protest, how the site was and the building of the power station was introduced with economic incentive. There used to be the saying, the future is coal, and how it concluded in a demolition that was more or less a good old-fashioned public spectacle. So another point that was interesting with this paper was that though the narrative actually had a formalized stop point at the decommissioning and switching off of Didcot Power Station and the subsequent end of British coal power, at the time of writing this paper in 2016, the demolition of the site was actually at a pause due to fatalities caused during the tearing down of the site. So in the time frame between the writing and publication of this paper, it was then that the three remaining hyperbolic cooling towers pictured there were demolished in 2019, and the final tower came down in February 2020. This gave an interesting scope for the actual possible reopening and expanding of this paper, even in terms of location with further building there, or in more generalized subject matter. So in terms of stylization, I chose to use investigative poetry as a format. So investigative poetry was pioneered by the great American poet Ed Sanders in the 1960s, and he basically described this as a call for poets to resume their ancient tradition of describing historical reality. He himself used this to great effect, covering subjects as varied as the Russian Revolution and Charles Manson. For me, however, I felt its epic and relatively narrative form meant that it would be accessible to any reader, and that the text could act as a stable baseline for more experimental investigation, which myself and my colleague decided to do so with the accompanying illustrations. So I want to show some of the accompanying artwork that accompanied the text now in its original colour form, at least, so you can see it how it originally looked. And it's in the journal, but it's in a shaded black and white. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to see it in form. So the first piece was called a sink. So this originally incorporates the handwritten sketch plans of the site with consolidated final plans, the created cooling tower formation, and also the names of the many contemporary coal power sites that were actually operational in the UK at that time, which are now all in stages of decommission. Desync is shown from the ceremonial switching off of Didcot A live in the control room. And the idea was the artist tried to give a kind of kinetic energy to this aspect. The chief engineer is actually pictured there, and after flicking off the switch, he famously gave a thumbs down, as he felt it too early to abandon coal. And the last piece of art was Land, which showed transition of the structural collapse of one of the main parts of the power station during demolition, with the proposed joint residential and commercial use plan that was being used as a redevelopment blueprint for the site. It's actually now very much up and running. So what we were trying to really touch on was a poetic form to use in relation to the subject matter, but a poetic form that could be accessible, and then actually using that, as I've said before, as a kind of a baseline for the more experimental riffs and I guess excavation of the theme. So there you go, that's my short presentation today.